Good evening, everybody, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to another in our RAU 175 Alumni Lecture Series. So I'm sure many of you have joined us before, but if you haven't, just to give you a quick update, this is a series of lectures that are being run as part of our 175th anniversary, which was last year, but obviously that was severely disrupted by COVID. And it has been an absolute pleasure to have introduced these because it's provided us with an opportunity to connect with our alumni and to hear really enriching conversations. Now, my thanks must go, first of all, to William Leschallas, who is the head of RELM, who has gathered for us this evening a really, I suppose, how else do I say it, very talented group of alumni who are working in a number of different businesses across the real estate and rural land management sectors. And William, I like the way that you've got it down as recollections, but I'm sure that we're also going to have thoughts for the future. And we've also got, I think it's really nice having people at different stages of their career. So I'll say a few words about the panelists, and I'm sure that they will also introduce themselves. So we have Richard Pilkington, is director of the Pilkington Farms Partnership, which is an arable and livestock farming group based in Herefordshire, but there's also got farms in Yorkshire. And being half from Yorkshire, then obviously it must be a very, very successful firm. And the firm generously supports a prize at the RAU, and we're very grateful for that. It launches in September, and it provides prizes to the best overall student in RELM in years 1 and 2. And I suppose it highlights how important these prizes are to recognise talent of the future. Welcome also to Charlotte Pink, who's Managing Director of John Allison, a residential development research and advice consultancy with a range of experience in residential development and encompassing sites for a handful of homes in a village settings, all the way up to major urban expansions and new settlements providing thousands of homes. And I'm sure that one of the themes that will come across in the talk this evening, in the discussion, will be around sustainability when you think of the different scopes of those projects. Richard Tolemash runs Buckminster, a family estate with residential and commercial property portfolios, farmland, forestry and sporting activities, a very diversified estate that endeavours to provide forward-thinking principles to stewardship and development while respecting traditional values. And I think that there is a really exciting discussion to be had around how the states are looking to the future. Howard Williamson is the acquisitions and asset manager at Harwood Real Estate, which is the property investment arm of Harwood Capital Management. And Harwood Real Estate owns and manages a mixed asset class of property investments across the UK. And last but by no means least is Ellen Fake, who completed her undergraduate degree very recently and is studying the MSc in Sustainable Agriculture and Food Security, which is a programme that other members of the panel would not have had as part of their portfolio when they were at the RAU. It's one of the new programmes that we've established, which has got a blended learning model. And Ellen lives in Norfolk, when not at Cirencester. So I will now hand over to William, and as I say, I hope you all enjoy the evening, and thank you again to the panelists, because we do appreciate you taking up your time. So I'm looking forward to hearing the talk.
Jo, thank you very much indeed, and a warm welcome to a good many alumni this evening. It's great to see so many join in this session. This is the first time I understand that the RAU have done this, especially online, where the alumni have all got together. And I'm going to ask everybody on the panel to switch their cameras on in a minute, if they could. That would be great. And we're going to start the session just by a further introduction, a personal introduction by each of them. And please make this as interactive as you want, everybody. This isn't a delivery by the panelists. We're supposed to be the catalysts for you to join in. Please do write things in the Q&A section. You should have a Q&A bit at the bottom of your screen. And then if all goes to plan, you're going to be able to switch on your microphones and ask your question of the panel, or perhaps of other people who've joined us this evening for them to contribute to the debate. But the start will be an introduction from each of us. And then I'll come back to myself at the end. So Richard Pilkington, if you're there, I'm going to hand over to you first, just to tell us a little bit about what you've done since we were together at the RAU.
Thank you, William, and thank you, Joe, for your warm welcome. I'm afraid I'm from Hertfordshire, not from Herefordshire, so I'm very suburban, really. And I've never been called talented before, but I'm deeply flattered by that.
Well, I'm sorry, my eyesight is clearly failing me, sorry.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. I'm flattered by both. I obviously was a contemporary of William's, not obviously, but and was. We shared a house together, in fact, and I left in '87, and I went and worked as an insurance broker. I sort of fell into that in reality, and I worked for Willis Faber a short while for Sedgwick's, and then Marsh McLennan until 2008, when I left to run our family businesses, which then consisted really of a very old shipping line and some ancillary businesses. And I ran those until I sold them in about 2017, one to a private individual, one to private equity. So I had some exposure of that. And since then, and throughout actually from '87 onwards, I'd always worked at home, doing some farming and property management. And then I've come back to do that. I am also, or was a school governor, and passionately keen on racing. I'm a member of a jockey club, and I am the chairman of Nottingham Racecourse. And I suppose it was through my school governorship and looking at various forms of fundraising that the school was doing that I really wanted to give something back on reflection, because I have daughters and therefore couldn't really correspond with their own school, to Cirencester, which had been such a formative part of my education. And that I didn't really realize how much it had helped me in all the things that I'd done until I'd left and had long gone and could reflect upon it. And so we are sponsoring, as Joe says, the top student either in year 1 or 2. And this is a prize that will last for 5 years for their yearly fee. I'm very conscious of how much education costs now compared with when William and I were at Cirencester ourselves, when I think we got a grant in those days of your county if they didn't have an agricultural college. And luckily, Hertfordshire claimed to have one at Shuttleworth, but we told them that was in Bedfordshire, and we managed to get round it. So we actually got paid for, and it is tough nowadays. So hopefully that will make the difference. I'm passionate about Cirencester. I hear an awful lot about Harper Adams. It drives me up the wall, and I really want to hear about Cirencester. And that is me in a nutshell, really, and I'm much looking forward to this evening.
Richard, thank you very much for that. And yes, I remember telling my father that I had got a grant, and he was absolutely thrilled. He said, "How did you do that?" And luckily, I just didn't have the course in the county. No white lies were spoken. So there we are. But we got the grant, and on we went. So I'm going to ask Richard, if Richard Tomash, if he could just say a few words. At this point, I'd just like everybody to note that the description that got communicated under Richard's name on 1 or 2 of the email circulations were just a placeholder, and they should have been, so therefore should have been replaced. So there are inaccuracies within it. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Richard.
Thank you, William. Yeah, it's read a bit like the Daily Mail, really, didn't it? So, you know, it's 18,000 acres or something, and then sort of large portfolio of properties and all the rest of it. It sounded grander than we actually are. I left Cirencester in '89, and I would certainly not count myself as talented in any shape or form. I think it must be a rare beast of Cirencester who are talented. Shropshire, I found myself in first after there, and then very quickly moved across to Norwich. I really did my land agency stuff there. After sort of 3 years of practicing land agency, I ran into the sort of difficulty of finding another job. So after 3 years, I ended up in London doing payphones into pubs, which really came about through the deregulation of BT. It was a very small niche, short-lived niche, because I don't think we find payphones around the place anymore now. We're all on mobile phones. But we were putting payphones into pubs and taking the cash, and if it made enough money, we gave a bit to the landlord. It was a way of them having a bit of income. But whilst I was there, I learned computer programming and helped design the computer management system for that. And I thoroughly enjoyed that, but my word, it was a steep learning curve. But then sadly, in '96, I lost my elder brother, Thomas, who died in a walking accident in Ireland that year. He was also a Cirencester one, and poor old Cirencester, I think, had about 8 years of toll matches. He turned up there at did the I think Advanced Farmer AFM at the time. Then I came along, and then he came back and did the estate management course after me. But this gave me a huge opportunity, which I otherwise wouldn't have had. And so I came back to Buckminster and sort of started to manage, or try and manage that, and find my feet. Buckminster is what you might consider a traditional rural estate with agricultural land, both in hand and tenanted, commercial tenants in rural locations, as well as town centre and edge of town development. So there's a lot going on. I personally try and farm. I farm a large sort of chunk of the estate myself in hand. That really came through my father, who, I think it was in the 70s, wasn't it? It was the only way of farming land. It wasn't a good idea to let land go off to tenanted, otherwise you end up with the AHA. Holding it out. On one of the successes, I think, of Buckminster in the village has been the conversion of the old office building accommodation. And it was tempting to do the normal and sell it for residential. That would be the economically wise move. But I managed to get a grant from the, the Rural Development Agency at the time. And we converted it to offices. And that has been fully let ever since we had it in 2011. And I think one of the successes of that was the fact I also put in fibre optic broadband in there at the time. And I think that, as a result, it has been fully let. We are also covering about 70 square miles of northeast Leicestershire with broadband as a result of that through wireless connections. And that is not really a money spinner, but it is much more of an enabler. Back 10 years ago, I could not see BT ever getting to us. So the simple answer was to do it oneself. In my spare time, I have 3 children, one of which is at Cirencester, one of which is about to start at Cirencester. I've until recently been a magistrate, and I serve active role in a local CLA as well as trustee of other charitable organisations, private estates, and bits and pieces like that. So a good range going on.
Richard, thank you very much for that. Payphones and the telephone box. Our telephone box in the village is now a library, and people come and go and drop books off and collect them. So no longer a payphone, but a library. So there we go. And what foresight with the fibre optic in 2011, if you were doing it back then, to what that's achieved for you now. So I'm going to move on to Charlotte, if you're there.
I am. Good evening, everybody. I'm actually struggling to follow those last 2 panelists. I was at Cirencester in 1982 to 86 and had a very interesting time at Cirencester. absolutely had a tremendous time, learned a huge amount. Not that I actually appreciated at the time that I'd learned a huge amount. It's very much found that out as I've developed my career going forward, really. I went down into Wells in Somerset to work as a rural practice surveyor for a firm called Clutton's. A really good rural practice firm in those days, and really good basis of training, which I was very lucky to have the partners I worked for, because they got me through my APC or my TPC in those days in a remarkably quick time, because I'd had a year out between my second and third year at Cirencester and worked for a gentleman called Richard Law, who I'm sure everybody will know very well, who was a very strong character and managed to teach me all about what being a land agent was. I went back and did my third year, and then went and joined Clutton's, and the following year I did my TPC, and very luckily graduated with that, which was tremendous, much to everybody's surprise, I probably think. But anyway, I was not a good rural practice land agent, really. As soon as milk quotas came into the world, where we hadn't had any training with milk quotas at Cirencester because they weren't involved in those days, but I was down in Somerset looking after dairy estates and farms, and doing rent reviews on dairy units with milk quotas, and that was absolutely not my bag at all. But what was the new thing, which was barn conversions. And we acted for a lot of the major estates down in the southwest of England, and I'm probably the culprit for most of the then barn conversions. We did hundreds of them, running through the various estates, looking at changes of use for alternatives for the rural estates to try and create a bit more value for them. And one of the partners I worked with was quite an entrepreneur, and it was really quite exciting to follow him. And I learned all about development agreements, option agreements, this sort of thing at an early stage. And then I left Clutton's and set up John Allison, which was a small practice turned into quite a family firm now. But we do strategic residential development land, which is long-term land, identification, acquisition, trudging through local plans, trying to understand documents, understanding where planning is likely to go. Again, a bit dull in a way, but in terms of trying to read these documents and trying to see where it was. And I just, again, thought, hang on a minute, it's got to be something more to this. So we started to look at prop tech about 10 years ago. And we started to try and look at how the local plan system was working in the country throughout England, and realized that actually none of them were compatible, and they didn't work very well together. In fact, they weren't at all working together. They're all very different. All had different aims and objectives, etc. So what we've done is we've built a platform called Landstack, which is an ancillary business to John Allison. And that basically, if you want to understand how and where residential development land is going, we're hoping that is going to give you the tool to enable you to do it. And it makes it very much more straightforward. And my aim has always been to build in the right places, because I do think that we've built a lot of residential development in the wrong place throughout this country. We haven't looked at infrastructure, etc. So I've been quite sort of geared up for that. Great fun, made a few interesting site acquisitions and sales on the way. I've had a wonderful time, but the big thing that's been a link for my profession has always been the fact that I came from Cirencester, because my colleagues at Cirencester, who I do keep in touch with, a number of them, and those that have come into the industry that I work in now, we work with a lot of landowners, obviously a lot of farmers, and they did say that when I was at Cirencester, that if you tried to walk from John O'Groats to Land's End, you could walk on Cirencester agricultural students' land all the way through the top. In fact, Jeff Craghill, who was the agricultural dairy lecturer at the time when I was there, if he fell out of a plane and landed somewhere on a field, he'd have to walk to about 2 fields, and he'd be on an agricultural piece of land that was looked after by a Cirencester student. I'm not so sure that is the case these days, but it needs to be, because what Cirencester did for me was it gave me a confidence and a tremendous sense of being able to do something. And I still, to this day, I'm practicing hard with the business that I run and thoroughly enjoy it. And we've got 2 sons who are both in the business, and my other son is an archaeologist, marine archaeologist at that, so swimming rather than walking. But we're having a great time, and it's that's what I do.
Brilliant, Charlotte. So that's really interesting. And gosh, when you at a very simple level, when one looks at how barns were converted in the early 90s to how you convert them now, and the technologies that are available, it's
incredible. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at what we did do in those days, they obviously going through their next generation of conversion now. I think, to be honest, a lot of the ones we did in the olden days was just conversion, and nowadays the different skill sets that are there for looking at what you can do with these buildings is quite incredible. But yeah, no, it was a very steep learning curve for me. It was great fun.
Yeah, I bet. Just a reminder to everybody, do put questions in the Q&A if you want, and make it as interactive as we can as we go through. So Howard, where are you, Howard? Let us know.
Well, a very tough act to follow from all of the panelists, but it's a great privilege to be invited to come and join the panel. I recently got in touch with William and did a talk with some students on the Real Estate Society, which was a fantastic opportunity, and I really encourage members to get involved as much as they can. It was really great to talk to current students at the university to see kind of how things have changed and where things are going. I graduated from the Royal Agricultural University in 2010. I did the master's program in real estate. I absolutely loved my time at the university. I came from a slightly different background and had a different career before joining the master's program. So it was really great to get stuck in. And didn't we play hard too? I mean, what a fantastic place to go and study. And have a great time. And a lot of the people that I met at my studies, I'm very much still in contact with and do deals with now, which is great. For me, the course at Cirencester was great because it was a very practical and vocational course, and that's what I wanted from studying my master's program. Land uses, estate management, development, asset management, and finance were kind of the areas that I wanted to kind of delve into, and I think I wasn't the typical land agent and had the typical background of a land agent, and Cirencester was able to offer me something different, which is great, and that experience and the learning became invaluable from when I progressed in my career, and also the APC. After my time at Cirencester, the college lecturers there very kindly introduced us to James Lang-LaSalle, who, as you'll all know, are a leading commercial property consultancy. And I went over to the Hong Kong office and worked in the global transactional management team on a graduate internship, which was facilitated by the Royal Agricultural University, which was great. I then went to go and work for an investment consultancy in London and qualified as a chartered surveyor back in 2012. I'm currently a professional member of the British Property Federation, and I'm a professional member of the Investment Property Forum in London, where I get involved with research and documents and discussions there. My current role, I work for an investment fund in Mayfair. The Harwood's Capital Management Group have £1.9 billion worth of assets held under management. I'm responsible for the asset management of those properties and the acquisition of other and new investments. They would be commercial investments, residential investments, and development opportunities. We own a mix rich of land and property all up and down the UK. Which is great, and lots of the skill set that I learned and developed at Cirencester, I bring to work every day. And I think what I loved looking back and reflecting on my time at Cirencester was it being a chartered surveyor was the very first step after leaving, and actually what Cirencester did for me was made me an entrepreneur. I own a restaurant on the South Coast, which I'm very much involved with the day-to-day running, and I also own another company in London. I think my time at Cirencester kind of allowed me to jump into those entrepreneurial ambitions, which is great really, because what we do in property is all about being an entrepreneur. It's about maximising value. It's about looking at new and exciting opportunities similar to what Charlotte just mentioned in terms of the prop tech and the land stack that she mentioned there. I mean, this is the way that the industry's going, and I think you quite often find lots of ex-Cirencester graduates leading that way, and I think it's really, really exciting, and it's great to be part of Cirencester still, to see what progress is being made by other alumni, really. So yeah, so there's me, William.
There we are. Yeah, Howard, thank you very much for that. I mean, your enthusiasm shines through when you're talking about the RAU and your work. And I know that the students really did appreciate you talking to the Real Estate Society last term. And it's great that you've joined the panel today. You have, before we even get to Ellen, reduced the average age substantially, no disrespect to the other three. But we're going to reduce it even further now, because Ellen, I'm going to ask Ellen to introduce herself. I'll aid her a little bit to say that she graduated last year. She was my personal tutee. She was also a course representative for the Rural Land Management degree, and did a fantastic job helping me through my first few years at the university. So over to you, Ellen.
Thank you, William, for such a lovely introduction, and thank you, Joe, and all the other panelists. It's lovely to be here. So as William says, I graduated in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, which is obviously quite an interesting experience. Then I went to work for a surveying firm in Cambridgeshire. Then I realised that actually I loved my time at Cirencester so much, why not continue it? So I started the Masters in Sustainable Agriculture and Food Security in January, absolutely loving it. And I'm balancing that at the moment between helping with our family farming and contracting business, where we've just finished a very busy lambing period of our Kerry Hills. And yeah, that's probably about it. I'm having the toughest act to follow after everyone else here, but yeah. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in a little bit, because I think you've been quite modest. You had a very tough year last year, and for all of those of you here today, just remember that Ellen, rather like ourselves, in the middle of March last year, was quite literally given her marching orders by the university, and hasn't been back since, I don't think, other than around her masters, and may not have even done that. And that applied to all of the students who left the university last summer. So a tough old time, but we'll come back to that in a minute, Ellen. I suppose it'd be remiss of me not to just say a little bit about myself as well. Is that, as Richard Pilkington said, he and I had the pleasure of living together for 3 years. We met for the first time, literally, I think, on the first day of being at the university, pretty much. He was a lost soul looking for a place to lay his head, and we had a spare bed in our room. And 3 years later, we were still getting on, still living together. So that was really good fun. Anyway, he went off to do his things, and I went off to become a chartered surveyor down in East Kent, working with Stratton Parker. Then I went to work for another local firm down there in East Kent, before moving over to the Cotswolds, where eventually I became a director of Jackson Stopps and Staff, as it was then, Jackson Stopps, and ran the Burford office in West Oxfordshire. And then one day a job came up at the university just about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And Joe very kindly offered me the job, and I end up doing what I'm doing now, and loving every single minute of it. Of course, it's got stresses and strains like everything else, but it's really good fun, and it's lovely to see the students progress. And, you know, for somebody like Ellen, who I remember when I first met her, I don't think she would have been brave enough to have come on this panel this afternoon, and here she is with us to tell us how she's got on, which is fantastic. So we've got a few questions, a few things to come on to in the panel, but if I may just ask just a couple of questions, perhaps, to the two Richards, and perhaps I could start with Richard Tollmarsh in the first instance, is that we've seen chief executives being employed now by large estate owners, by estate owners, rather than necessarily the traditional route that you leave the RAU, become a land agent, become the lead agent, and that's it. Because the estates now are so complex and have got many other income streams, you've mentioned them already. So can you just give a view on the advisor?
Ooh, which one? I
There
mean,
you
we
go.
just have an absolute myriad of advisors. I think I probably have a core team, which consists of a sort of chief executive who is sort of definitely land agency trained, but has got a lot more sort of financial acumen and that sort of stuff. And it's there really to try and drive the business forward. Under him, I've got another land agent who looks after the agricultural land and does the day-to-day management of it. And then one has a very close relationship with lawyers and accountants, and that's the core team that then reports to the trustees. I think Cirencester provides a credible sort of starting point. I like Charlotte. I really didn't learn. I wasn't a particularly good learner. But not sort of behind a desk anyway. In fact, I think there was a fairly standard joke that there was a struggle to find the library at Cirencester on occasions. Not many of us knew where it was, and I was very much in that camp. But I found when I left, and particularly on the death of my brother, when I really was left to sort out the estate, and I had the amazing opportunity to rejig the estate due to his death, and therefore I was talking directly to the trustees, solicitors, and really sort of being able to talk to them at a reasonable level, you know, and knowing what I was talking about, and that was something that Cirencester really did give. In terms of where we're heading, I think it's just more and more specialism. You know, we're having more and more regulation coming through, and there's more to trip over, if you like. And you just need really good, steady advice from all walks of life. You know, so to back me up, I have a health and safety officer, I have a human resources, I have marketing, I have portfolio manager, a specialist development advisor. And then you go into EPCs, you know, it just goes on and on and on. I think when we left Cirencester, it was very much more a generalistic approach to life, and we've had to specialize. Does that answer your question?
It does, and hopefully it'll create some thought from on the chat as well. No, that's great. Richard P, have you got something to add to that from your perspective?
I have, and like Richard, I suppose our view was, you know, if you want to be commercial, you've got to set yourself up commercially. And like Richard had said, the CFO and CEO, we looked at, we were managed by an agent, and quite rightly, we just went our separate ways. We were really managed by someone who only looked after us and then retired. We used Struts to run a process for hiring that person. He actually wasn't a Cirencester person, but that was because not many of you applied, so please do it next time. He came from Newcastle University, but was a CAAV qualified, so we were looking for either FRICS or CAAV. And it's been a great success. I would add that our chief financial officer, who's a qualified accountant, is a great help as well in all the planning. What we look for is, I suppose, is advisors and firms that will give us clarity of thought. That's really important to us, that they will add value. And that they will give us deal flow and opportunity. And now that's a really important part of Cirencester, is to become part of the knitting circle of deal flow and opportunity. I worked in insurance. Insurance was a completely open market, and we had to get on with our fellow underwriters and we had to compete for business all day, every day in an equal market. And it is vital that people coming forwards have that alumni feeling that deals and opportunities and expertise can flow freely amongst us. You know, there's no monopoly on good ideas, but we want good ideas brought to us, and we will open the door to everyone. I mean, as a result, you know, we talk hopefully every week to Struts, Knight Frank, and Savills. Savills do our agriculture, Knight Frank give us general information, and Struts work around our value proposition, and so on and so forth. And that is, you know, so it is thriving there, but I think that generalism has gone and specialism is what certainly we like, and we like to add value. Can I say one very small thing, William, which is that John Whibley is there. And when I was at Cirencester, John Whibley was a great man, but he marked me down, and it really kicked me in my first year for writing too many words and having too few diagrams on how to grow potatoes. And I really knew my place at that point, which was a tractor between two rows of potato, tractor wheel or whatever I was supposed to do. But I wrote too much. Anyway, John, wishing you well, and glad to see you're firing in those questions, which have been cancelled as quick as you can fire them in, as far as I can see. Anyway, that's for me.
Richard, no, that's really, really helpful, really good stuff. And John Whibley, I'm going to give you access to respond to those accusations. I'm sure you remember the paper really well, because Richard had that way of being fairly unforgettable in such circumstances. So we'll wait and see what you have to say, John, if you're up for it. So that would be good. Now I'm going to get a little bit more technical now, and if Charles Bridgman is there, I hope you can now switch on your microphone and ask the question of our probably our two owners, the two Richards again. But don't worry, Charlotte, don't worry, Howard and Ellen, your time is going to come.
Is my microphone working with you?
Yes, it is, Charles.
Oh, good. Yeah. First, I'd like to say that I did the B course in those days. I did it in 2 years, years 2 and 3. They were two of the happiest days of my life. And also, I learned a huge amount when I was at Cirencester. One long story, which we don't have time to tell, enabled me to develop the old stables at the property I manage. Yes, really worrying with the government's aspirations on raising EPC values on property, and bearing in mind we are mainly dealing with very old-fashioned property with very poor insulation. My worry is that it's going to, the cost of doing it is going to push the rents up beyond the reach of local people. And that's something I think we all try to do, is to support and provide good quality accommodation for local people, local working people. I'm not quite sure what the answer is. Any thoughts, really, the two Richards?
Richard, do you want to have a go at that one?
Well, I think you're dead right, and we all face the same problem. I think with EPCs, interestingly, one of the people in our office has taken the course to better understand both sides of that mystery argument. So they have become a qualified EPC surveyor in order that we can deal with that. It's an issue. The electrical issue is just the same. The fire issues are just the same. We're very lucky. We're in Hertfordshire, so you know our rents are pretty strong at the moment, and so we can deal with those. But we've had to carry them out over the last 3 years, and it's been a nightmare, to be honest. But we are just about there. But we've got old brick, which, as you know, has very poor insulation. Lots of people have considered selling them off. I think the trouble with selling is you never get back in. It's tied up in trusts, etc., etc. But Richard presumably has much more layered stuffing, much more old than us parvenus, so we tend to be less protected on that. But it's very difficult. I'll leave it to Richard on that one.
I think it really is difficult. I think we've managed to get, I think, all bar about 2 through on the E rating. The next one is frightening. You know, there's no doubt about it. I think the only thing it is a live issue in Parliament. You know, it's very much talked about and trying to sort of work it through. So you know, one thing we can do is actually encourage people to sort of make representations to our MPs and that sort of stuff, and so see if we can get anywhere that way. I think it'll. There was a time, I think, back in the 70s or 60s, when it was the worst thing you could do is give somebody a house. You know, they didn't make any money, and then in the more recent times, last 30 or 40 years, it's done well. Maybe this is just one of those cycles. It's a rather hopeful thought, I think. But in terms of what we're doing, we're not selling off. We're seeing if we can hold. We're just thinking about seeing if we can put up new stock and maybe move some on, but leaving that option available should we need to.
Charles, does that sort of help? If you're,
He's gone.
can you not speak? You might not be able to speak because I think it was one answer and then we move on. So apologies for that. But if you want to put something in the chat, please do. So I think John Wibberley has now got his chance to respond. John, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
There we go. So your chance to respond to Richard Pilkington.
Well, I've sent in a brief note, belated apologies. I don't remember it. I think if it was potatoes, it would have been Jim Lockhart, actually, because he taught all the potatoes, but Jim's no longer with us to defend himself, so I'll send a general apology. But maybe, Richard, it made you the man you are today, or did its little part to help. So who knows? I just wanted to ask, really, all the panelists, accepting what you're saying about specialists and specialist consultancies, don't you think that the principal in a business does need to still be a polymath? Because you need to understand not only the questions to ask, but also the answers when they come in, and somehow integrate those into a way forward.
Oh, the Richards,
I totally agree with that. I mean, it's exactly the point. You need a chief exec who has got agricultural background. He has that expertise, but then he looks out to the individual specialist to really make sure that we are moving forward in the right way and getting that advice. It's just so. I'm sorry, I'm waffling, but it's. I agree with you entirely. You know, agriculture. You've got to have it. You know, for an agricultural estate, you've got to have. You've got to understand that agriculture and how the agricultural law works.
Great, Richard. I've hopefully got someone coming online now, and that is Scott. We're moving the agenda on. We're going to come back to one of the other things in a minute for you, Charlotte. But Scott, are you willing to ask that question of Howard?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
We can indeed. Go for
Brilliant.
it.
Well, great to meet all of you, and it's a pleasure to be on listening to such distinguished and accomplished individuals. Yeah, so I just wanted to know a bit more about the how placement contributes to learning with the courses. Howard said that he did a course with JLL, sorry, did a placement with JLL. I've also got one other question. I'm quite excited to have the opportunity to ask all of you guys, but I've got one other question which I could ask now or wait till slightly later on.
Put it in now and we'll see if we can get to it.
Okay, the other one is, do you think there will be long-term effects from the pandemic with regards to where people choose to live, whether people will move out to more rural areas?
I'd love to pick that one up.
And then and how planning changes in rural areas are going to help accommodate this.
Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do, because Charlotte looks as though she's absolutely champing at the bit on that one. So I'm going to let Charlotte answer that one now, and then we'll come back to the placement bit, because that will work quite nicely in with Ellen. So Charlotte, over to you.
I am absolutely stunned at the speed that development land's been going forward in the last year. I know that the pandemic has been absolutely hideous and really, really difficult. We've not had a day off. We've been so busy. The way that the change of people's thoughts about living in houses that they've been living in obviously over the last generation as normal, living in cities, living in London, the clients that I've got in terms of the house builders and what they're doing, even new homes, etc. But certainly moving out to sort of Oxfordshire down into Gloucestershire, the rural areas are going to get very strongly, the market is very strong, the house prices are very strong, people are starting to move out, and people are starting to suddenly realize what living is about. I think we've all worked, the last majority of us here, in a normal way. We've gone to work, we've got up, gone to work, you don't need to, you can work from home, and I think there's going to be a massive sea change in terms of how people live going forward. I know it's going to be not 100%, but certainly my team are all, if not, well, they are actually all part-time in the office now, and won't be full-time back, and therefore they can live remotely and work remotely, and it's going to have a big impact on house prices in rural areas, definitely, but also in terms of planning. Certainly local authorities can now start to think about where they want to put housing in the right places, rather than just where the jobs are in cities, etc. Hope that answers the question.
Charlotte, I think it does, and thank you very much. I mean, I'm staggered as well, seeing how quickly the market has changed. From speaking to some of my friends and colleagues, from this time last year, where they were looking down a barrel, basically, to the estate agents now sort of being actually struggling to have enough property to sell, especially here in the Cotswolds. I think the question that I sort of asked myself is that even in the boom times, there were people who moved out of the towns and cities and realized it didn't suit them and moved back. And I do just wonder, if one's looking 2 or 3 years hence, whether how many people will start to move back, or whether they will just decide that country living is the way to go, and the city life they have truly left behind. I don't know whether you've got any viewpoints on that from your recent experience.
I just think that certainly in terms of people going up and living in London for the high life of London, is because in like Cirencester there isn't a high life. It's okay, but it's just a rural area. I think we've got to start and think about where, certainly again, we're based in the Cotswolds, and we've got 36 staff scattered all over the place. The main ones are local, but they need to have a life as well. And I think we've got to start and regenerate the rural areas for families and living where we want to live. I think the rural areas are really sacrosanct for rural pursuits, and we've got to learn to look after the rural areas even more than we have been doing, because dog walking, for example, has become a massive issue for a lot of my landowner clients. Have got major problems with people buying a dog this last year and walking all over their farm without knowledge of how to do it. So I think the world is changing significantly, and I think that, okay, some people will go back, but I do think we're going to go through a very big sea change. When I started out in 86, sorry, the computers there weren't any computers, and we went through a 2-year period where we went from Tipexing out problems on a letter to a computer. And then we've worked the last 30 years in that basis. And I think suddenly there's a big change. We went paperless in our practice over the last 2 months, because we haven't been able to use files. So Shreddit came and shredded every file we've got, apart from the ones we've got to save for policy reasons. I think we're changing the way we live, and I think it's a positive thing in the right way, providing we look after each other better.
I would have thought the big change seems to be the fact that the owners of businesses have been shown that it can work, Well, I think before there was a fear of letting everybody go.
You didn't trust people. You didn't trust people to work at home because you thought they had to work in front of you all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, as rural practice surveyors, we've always, right from the day one, I never worked in front of the team I was working for. I was always out in the car, going to meet tenants, going to meet landowners, going to do whatever. So we were always trusted to do our job. And I think that's probably from our training at Cirencester and the way our careers have developed, that set the scene for now quite well, because we're all quite able to work on our own and deliver and be trusted to work, which I think is actually going back to what we're all here about is Cirencester. That certainly did. The team approach and the family approach and the way that you should look after each other. That's one thing Cirencester students do. And I think that's developing well as well in our careers.
Do you think it provides another challenge for landowners to show what we do? I think there's a complete misunderstanding of what the living in the countryside's about.
Yeah.
You know, I think I think as a group of people, landowners do tend to back away.
I think we've just been very, very lucky not to have to deal with Joe Public in a big way. Actually, I think the problem is education, and if we educate properly and be inclusive, everybody will rub along together. It's only because people don't understand, and I think you're right. I think we probably just have lived in. I often say I live in a bubble. I don't see the world as it really probably is. I just live in my bubble and get on with what I do, and I think we probably all do that actually. And maybe we should step out of it sometimes and look at what we need to do.
Richard, I know that your comment was made about, and we had discussed it yesterday, about the image of the landowner, the image of the farmer. And sadly, the time is marching on, and I'm very keen to get to some other things. But I do think we as a group of alumni have an opportunity to get together. And please bear in mind, everybody on the call, that apart from Richard and I, none of us really knew each other until a year or two ago. And in fact, with Richard and I last year, Richard T, that is, and Howard Williamson earlier this year, and the alumni have come together, and it's absolutely fantastic. But I think we could do so much more to help the image of the landowner and the farmer, and perhaps that's another area of discussion, but perhaps for another day. Howard, you're lurking there. I was just wondering, do you have a perspective from London? Because I've got one of my old friends who we were at university with has said, at what point does the countryside become a city? We have serious problems with public access too. So what's the perspective of the exodus from the cities, and perhaps those sorts of comments that come through?
I think the biggest challenges we have at the moment is planning and clarification on planning, and every local authority is different local development framework. Some are very, very dated, and some are still emerging, and some are still in consultation. And I think COVID in the last 12 months has had a huge impact. And I think looking from an investment fund's perspective of investing on the high street and funding regeneration programs, it's where are the local planners in supporting national policy? In the middle of COVID, we had Boris standing there saying build, 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 and the local authorities couldn't really keep up with implementing new local development frameworks. And I think that's a massive problem. The high street in particular, and the changes and the need for investment on not just London high streets, but regional and rural hamlets. It's about supporting those businesses and finding other ways. And we've all gone online to Amazon and things like that. And I think business models have changed with local retailers, but I think also we all know that Amazon aren't paying the same level as tax as a local independent store in Cirencester. So I think there needs to be new incentives, and I think local planning policy needs to support the new business innovations, and permitted development rights and changing office buildings into residential is all well and good, but we've got the problems with the EPCs, the planning, the now EICR perspective. So I think there's a lot more work to be done there, and I could talk for the next half an hour, and I'm conscious about time, but I think that's the biggest thing. And I'll let Ellen talk about the placements, because that's probably.
But
yeah.
Where I'd like to go to now is actually, because I think what Charlotte and you have touched on and is talked about quite a bit now is that actually we all went into the pandemic with a bucket load of contacts. We knew lots of people, and we know lots of people. For the person leaving the RAU tomorrow or in a week or two's time, for those who left last year, they haven't got that little black book of people they can ring up. They haven't got the corridor chats, or they haven't had the corridor chats that enable them to learn from the experts like you, Charlotte. And I think,
well, can I just add that just quickly, just in terms of the absolute thrill you get out of employing a graduate. I've employed 2 graduates and had a number of placements in my practice, but 2 graduates recently. Both came in from rural practice. Both got on and did P&D, planning and development, and one passed her APC in P&D, which is actually one of the hardest parts of the APC to do. But the thrill you get out of seeing them grow and develop and go forward is enormous. And these kids do need they need us as a group of people to put our arm around them and give them a job in a holiday or a summer or an Easter, to show them and just put them in the car and take them with you, because the 2 grads I had were rural practice. They had no idea they wanted to do development. They just came to have a look at it, and they're both of them now development surveyors. And one in particular is going, flying, and it is such a thrill to see it, and it will give you a different dimension on your job, in that you see these kids come through and expand their lives and actually fly. And if I hadn't had the mentors that I had in Vic Hughes at Cirencester, Michael Hay at Clutton's, Richard Law, funnily enough, that I would not have got where. I mean, it was a really hard chore to actually get where you want, but those people made me what I do now, and I know they did, and I owe a huge amount to them for what they did do. But I think we're not giving that back at the moment. We're not doing it, and we should be doing a lot more than we are. I think it's really important.
Charlotte, yeah, well, you and I have discussed it, and I share I share your sentiments entirely. So, Ellen, your chance. I know we haven't got much time, but it's a very important part of the discussion, which is, your experience over the last year, and perhaps your feeling about being mentored whilst you're at the university, because I think the university, from what we've had from feedback, has done a grand job, an excellent job, compared with some of our competitors and some of the other universities and educational establishments around the country. So, Ellen, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your experience when you were red carded in March last year, sent home?
Yeah, I mean,
go from there.
I can remember being sat in my last lecture with my colleagues, everyone on the course, being very confused, and I remember being sat there and the lecturer was like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen at this point, but obviously we'll keep in contact with you. And nobody knew at that point, and we walked out of that lecture and that was it. And I haven't been back to Cirencester since, even though I'm on my master's yet, but I'm looking forward to it soon. But the support that I had, especially from William and from everyone else on the course, was incredible. The uni kept us up to date. We were regularly involved in Teams meetings about what the lecturers could do to improve sort of the connection and establishing that online connection that felt like you weren't on your own and you weren't finishing your dissertation on your own. And that was, it's part of the Ciren community. And I think that they were incredible in how they kept that supportive feel going throughout the pandemic. But I do definitely agree with what Charlotte and William outlined. I think there is room for possibly, the alumni community to sort of, strengthen the links between young graduates and the people that are now going to come through the university as well. And it's really, as it's been mentioned before on the panel, you know, you can instantly link with someone and reminisce about your times as a Cirencester. I know I've only just left, but you do always have that sort of Cirencester connection, and that's amazing to see it in the industry. So to be able to bring that forward and to, you know, develop your connections to help our future careers, I think would be a really great thing. And if anything, it just spreads the message of Cirencester, you know, the community feel. The lecturers are always, you know, leaders in their industry, and I think it's getting that message forward that Cirencester is, you know, one of the best places to study for many other reasons other than the actual studying. It's the connections, the community, and the support that they give overall. So an alumni sort of community is great to have.
And what would you think about being, I know we're closing in now on time, but what would you think about having a mentor? If you had been offered a mentor in your first week of the university, or perhaps in the first week of your second year to see you through, how do you think that would have gone down?
Gosh, I think it would have been incredibly helpful. I think that, you know, many people have struggled finding jobs this year, and I appreciate do with every year. It's a competitive industry to get into. So I think having someone there to guide you, to sort of help you through sort of the other options. I mean, for me, I remember speaking to William when I was a few months into my surveying role, and I sort of said, like, I'm not sure if it's for me, and William sort of said, oh well, maybe look into these options. And for me, William sort of presented that sort of alumni sort of mentor, you know, he guided me, and he said you could go back to studying, you could do this. So that's the sort of role I think that we could do with, and I think would be really helpful.
I'll mute myself, Ellen. Thank you very much. That's great. And so that some feedback would be great from those who've joined the call. Joe Price, VC, has put, Joe, I think you put it in the private message to the panel, so I shall read it out. If anyone is interested in joining a new alumni committee we're setting up, please let us know. I hope that was in order, Joe, to read that out, but that's what I've done.
Well, thank you, William, and it was really relevant to the ongoing discussion, because I think I put it out to all, so that's okay, William. But...
No, you have you? Sorry, Joe, if you
no,
have.
that's fine, don't worry.
As we draw to a close, Joe, I know that you weren't necessarily going to close the meeting, because I've got a few things I'd like to say, but is there anything you would like to add at this point?
I just think it could have gone on for a very long time, but as I say, I thought we covered some really critical points actually, and thank you all for those contributions. I think it's reassuring that some of the initiatives that we're bringing in, such as the placement year coming back, because those skills are so critical, and William has made a huge difference by bringing back placement option for students. But what we've just talked about is absolutely critical. If that placement is going to be successful, we will need support from our alumni. And we were talking about the other day, if we can engage you as our alumni to help make those placements more successful and rewarding for our students, it will make a huge difference, because we can't do it without you. And we've got this amazing network. I mean, I think what we don't do well enough, and we've talked about this a lot at this Cirencester, is we don't convey enough those sort of rather less tangible things that you gain at Cirencester, such as that can-do attitude, an ability to be entrepreneurial, which Howard brought across. You know, the innovation that comes with our graduates is quite outstanding, and somehow we need to do a really good job of encapsulating that. And one of the reasons for sort of having this new alumni engagement committee, and I won't speak for too long, is to have a group of alumni that we can talk to more closely, if you like, about what's happening, so we can reach out to other alumni through that network. Because I think we do need to help people understand all the good things we're doing, but to do a better job at selling the amazing experience you get here. And thank you for encapsulating what it's done for you. It is really quite extraordinary that not necessarily that you can stand on land that everybody owns in the UK, but you can't go anywhere, it feels to me, as someone joining this community, without meeting someone who knows someone or is related to someone who went to Cirencester. And that's something quite extraordinary, I think. So William, over to you.
Joe, thank you very much. And couldn't agree with you more if I tried. So thank you very much. And I think it's time to wrap up. It's now just gone, or nearly 7:05. I do apologise to those who've asked some technical questions. We were going to very close to talking about solar farms. We were very close to talking about, where was it? I can't remember, something to do with Brexit and the future of land tenure, and also John Wibberley's comments about the agriculture bill, etc., etc. But keep in touch, everybody. If you could spread the word, this is a bit of a sales pitch now. I don't make no bones about it. The alumni office would love to hear from you as to what you're doing, what you can do to support the students, especially at this time. It's great to hear from you. I never expected I'd be back at the RAU doing the job I'm doing. For a few of you on the call, I'm sure that you'd pull my leg if we were standing at the bar having a pint now. But it's fantastic. It's a great place still, and is going places. So please keep in touch, everybody. And can I just finish by thanking the two Richards, Charlotte, Howard and Ellen, for their contributions. And I don't know about you, but I felt it's been fantastic. I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed listening to what everybody's had to say. And Ellen, thanks so much for bringing down the average age. You've been a star. I know you only got a few minutes at the end, but they were crucial minutes. So on that note, I'll close the meeting. Thank you to everybody who's joined in this evening. Thank you for your contributions. Sorry if you did not have your questions answered. I'll now let you go, and I'm sure have a very large drink. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
everyone. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.